Jessiel. Thank you for being here today to talk to me about labor safety for youth. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, America. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you some questions and really about the from a sponsor perspective. Sponsor of unaccompanied youth or the caretakers. So I wanted to start off with asking you a little bit about what are their primary responsibilities as sponsors or caretakers.
Certainly, there are many responsibilities as caregivers and sponsors have, and some of the basic ones are ensuring that there is a clear commitment to education or schooling, and that children are attending, that everything is all set with their education. Then other ones are very key, like healthcare, having access to healthcare and other basic needs, making sure that they are developing in a healthy way and that nothing is necessarily lacking. Another one very important for this topic is that if they have an immigration case, they should be attending immigration appointments as well as any court hearings. And that if the children or youth are working, that they're doing in safe environments as well as making sure that their rights are not being violated at the workplace.
Thank you. I hear you mentioning the school piece. Why is it so important for kids to be in school?
It is very important for young people to be in school because school is the gateway to a number of things. In school, they can obviously engage with others, socialize, learn English, have a safety net of sorts within the school. But also, it's worth mentioning that in the US, young people are required to go to school for the most part until age 16. In some states, it may be higher, but across the board, it's pretty normal that it's 16-year-old has to be up to 16 years old. Someone has to be in school. The other thing is that not attending school regularly could trigger the involvement of authorities, whether child protective services or other authorities, and no one wants to be in that process. So ensuring that young people are going to school is the best way to avoid that. And obviously, school has a lot of other resources connected to the community through the school adjustment counselors and other resources. So it's an excellent way for the family to be connected in many ways, as well as the young person. Not to mention long-term educational and career goals. The young people who stay in school have a higher potential of earning more long-term because of the education and training that they receive.
Thank you for mentioning that and for mentioning that schools can be a resource. We often hear that students are faced with economic challenges, and maybe not having enough resources. Can you talk to us a little bit more about maybe where sponsors can go to get more resources?
Definitely. And I know that many young people want to support their families, especially when things are tight economically. Schools are, as I mentioned, a good way to connect to that. There are food pantries, clothing banks, other different types of community resources. The schools themselves have reduced or free lunch and breakfast for the most part. And there are also many summer meal programs that young people can access. There are a number of migrant programs or kind of vulnerable populations focused programs, not to mention referrals to possible learning English, higher education, even legal services, and the like. So the school is a good way to connect with broader community services and also increase a safety net for the families.
And you mentioned a lot of really important resources, but you also mentioned that youth also feel the need to contribute to the homes and they feel that they must work because the needs are real, right? And so, what are some ways that youth can safely engage with labor or work?
Definitely. And we have to recognize that and also value the fact that young people want to contribute and be productive. But there are very specific rules in terms of how they can engage with work or work environments. I'll try to summarize the main ones, which is for those who are between the ages of 14 and 15, they're able to work part time as long as doesn't have a negative impact on their school. For those who are 16 and 17, they're able to work full time as long as it's safe and it's not obviously hindering their development. And obviously, it's worth mentioning that all young people should be safe, working in safe environments. The agricultural job category is the one that's a little different. Those for agricultural jobs, someone between the ages of 14 and 15 is able to work full time as long as they are enrolled in school full time as well. For those who are 16 to 17-year olds, they can work full time in any agricultural job. However, it's worth mentioning that working full time can obviously have a potential negative impact on education and access to later opportunities, right, of higher paying jobs. And also that labor laws vary state by state or even city to city. And it's important for someone to be familiar with the rules on the area that they're in before engaging in any work.
There's definitely a lot to learn about all that. We also hear sometimes about labor exploitation. Can you tell us a little bit about what are some signs of labor exploitation?
Certainly. Labor exploitation is common and it can affect anyone, not only young people. And it's important to make sure that if a young person is working longer hours than they should be working, or for later than they should be working legally, or if they're, for example, not being paid what they were supposed to be paid for their work, or if they're working in dangerous conditions, that could be a sign of labor exploitation. If a child, for example, has injuries or an illness resulting from work, that could be part of that, because let's remember that young people's bodies are still developing and certain jobs may have a negative impact or hinder their development in some ways, and they should be mindful of that. Also, there's loss of education, being emotional, and also sometimes mental stress, depending on their work environment, especially if they're being exploited, as well as a number of other things. It's important to mention that young people are not cannot be forced to work. If someone is being forced to work against their will, that is also an indication that there may be some labor exploitation going on.
And what can someone do if they think that they know that someone is being exploited?
Yes, that's very key, because obviously we may know what labor exploitation is, but taking action is also important. Obviously, if someone is a kind client, the number one thing is to reach out to their attorney and seek advice and potentially even a referral to a labor exploitation attorney, and other resources. For There's also, and this is interesting because it's not only for young people; it could be for anyone, an adult of any age or a young person. There is some immigration relief available for those who have either been in a labor exploitation situation or witnessed some labor exploitation. That is called deferred action for labor exploitation investigations. And basically, what that means is that there has to be an investigation by the Department of Labor and or other law enforcement agencies, and the person is able to then solicit this relief from USCIS based on their qualifications if they do. And it's helpful to mention that it is always a good practice to get advice from an attorney before starting this process, because obviously it can be a layered process for anyone applying.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that piece about seeking help, especially if they're undocumented. Some people sometimes are afraid to do that, but I'm glad that there are some benefits out there for people who are undocumented. My next question is a little bit about we talk about children and youth, but what if they're already over 18? Do they get the same protections?
Definitely. As I mentioned before, labor laws are for everyone, regardless of their age. But it is worth mentioning that for older youth and those that are 18 and over, sometimes maybe we don't look at them as intentionally to support them because they also have a level of independence. But they still need support, they need monitoring, and they need to have opportunities of healthy development just as any young person. And it's important to make sure that they have the protection. And so the labor laws are for everyone, 18, under 18, or even an older adult.
Thank you for all that. And I guess finally, the if you can just give us some last recommendations on what can sponsors do to help their youth feel empowered, supported as they navigate the work world.
Certainly, these concepts can be obviously not our everyday conversation, but it is important for people to be informed and to have all the knowledge they can, as well as the resources available. But some of the things that can be most protective for youth are making sure that they're in safe environments if they're going to work, that their labor rights are being upheld when they are in a work environment, but also to have a connection with the community, to make sure that they're able to speak their language, to have anything about their culture and their identity honored. That is very important. To have a trusted community around them, where if someone is seeing that something is it's off, they can say, I don't know if that job is the best place. Can we look into that further? And so making sure that cultural ties, identity, honoring practices, and the like are important for young people and for sponsors to keep in mind when they're supporting a young person to be safe.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for giving us all this valuable information.
My pleasure.
Labor laws are for everyone, and labor exploitation is illegal no matter how old the person is. If the young person you are sponsoring receives a job offer, they should ask questions to see if it seems trustworthy. Questions about salary, how often they will be paid, working hours and conditions, and who the employer is can prevent risks. There are also special additional protections for children because of their vulnerability. If the child doesn't have an attorney, reach out to your local attorney, bar association, or a nonprofit legal services organization. Head to KIND's website to get more information about where to get help. KIND is a nonprofit organization that helps protect the rights and well-being of unaccompanied children. Thank you for listening.